Hello fellow enthusiasts! This is a Raspberry Pi Zero. Essentially, it's a small, inexpensive computer. We use these as controllers for data collection applications. Just like any computer, it needs an operating system to be useful. Today I'm going to show you how we install an operating system on a Raspberry Pi Zero to make it useful. Before you start, you should have the following: a Raspberry Pi Zero or Raspberry Pi Zero 2 single board computer, a micro SD card that the Pi will use for its operating system and data storage. For most of our applications, a 32 gigabyte SD card is sufficient. A 5-volt USB power supply that will source at least 2 amps of current. The power supply should have a USB-B micro male connector to connect power to the Raspberry Pi. You'll also need a USB-A female to USB-B micro male connector to connect a keyboard to the Raspberry Pi. An HDMI-A female to mini HDMI-C male adapter to connect an external monitor to the Raspberry Pi. At this point, you should install the SD card into your desktop computer. The next step is to install the Raspberry Pi Imager software. On your desktop computer, open a web browser and navigate to the official Raspberry Pi site at www.raspberrypi.com. Click on the software option. You should see a download page for the Raspberry Pi Imager. This is a program that runs on a desktop computer and allows you to select and download an operating system image file for the Raspberry Pi. You'll need to install the Imager program on your desktop computer. For this tutorial, I'm using a Windows laptop, so I select Download for Windows. Save the Imager software to your hard drive and run it. Click through the installation options that are presented as you normally would when installing software on your computer. After the installation finishes, make sure Launch Raspberry Pi Imager is selected. Then click Finish to start the Imager software. You're now ready to create an operating system image for the Raspberry Pi and write it to the SD card. To create the image, you need to tell the Imager software which Raspberry Pi model you are using, which Raspberry Pi operating system you want, and where to store the image. Make sure the Device tab on the left of the Imager window is selected. On the right side, scroll through the list of Raspberry Pi models. Depending on which version of Raspberry Pi Zero you purchased, you should select either Raspberry Pi Zero or Raspberry Pi Zero 2W from the list. If you don't remember which model you bought, you can look on the bottom of the Raspberry Pi board. The version is listed underneath the double row of header pins. For this tutorial, I have a Raspberry Pi Zero 2, so that is the one I choose. After selecting the Pi model, click the Next button. You'll see a list of operating systems on the right side of the window. Scroll down through the list. Select Raspberry Pi OS Other and then choose Raspberry Pi OS Lite 32-bit. This option provides a good balance between operating system size, speed, and capability. For our data logger, we don't need a window manager or desktop environment. We can do everything we need with just a command shell. After selecting Raspberry Pi OS Lite 32-bit, click the Next button. You should see the SD card that you previously inserted. Select this drive and click Next to continue. You should now choose a host name, which is the name for your Raspberry Pi. This name should be something unique on your network and something you will remember. Next, you'll set the time zone for your Raspberry Pi. Choose a capital city within your time zone, the time zone you want, and a keyboard layout. Then click the Next button. You'll now pick a username and password to access the Raspberry Pi. Many people simply choose Pi as the username, but you can enter whatever you like. Create a password and commit it to memory or a password keeper. Confirm the password and then click Next. Once you've done that, it's time to set up a Wi-Fi network. Make sure the Secure Network button is selected. And then enter the SSID and password for your Wi-Fi network, just like you would if you were connecting your phone or another device. Click the Next button when those fields are entered. You should also set up SSH authentication. On the next screen, click the Enable SSH slider and choose Use Password Authentication. We'll be using Secure Shell, or SSH, and its companion program, SCP, to copy files to the Raspberry Pi. Click the Next button when you're done. On the next screen, you're given the option to enable Raspberry Pi Connect. Clear Creek Scientific data loggers do not need this option. I suggest you leave it disabled, then click the Next button. You're now ready to write the image to the SD card. Note that doing so will erase any data that is stored on the SD card, so make a backup now if there's something you want to save. Once you're ready, click the Write button to write the image. If you see a window pop up and ask you to insert a card into the drive, you can likely ignore it. Click back on the Raspberry Pi Imager status window. If it says it is writing to the card, you don't need to do anything else. You can ignore the pop-up message. Writing the image to the card takes quite a bit of time. Let it run to completion. At this point, I'm going to fast forward the video to prevent you from having to wait too long. Once the Imager says Write Complete, you can click the Finish button to close the Imager program. Now that the image is written to the SD card, you can use it to boot the Raspberry Pi for the first time. You're going to need an external keyboard and monitor. remove the SD card from your computer and put it into the slot in the Raspberry Pi. Next, attach the monitor, the keyboard, and the power supply. The green LED light on the board should turn on, and the screen should start to flash messages indicating that the operating system is starting. There will be a lot of messages. The Pi will take some time to boot. It usually reboots after the first time it starts up. Wait for all the messages to finish. This takes some time. I'll speed up the video again. Once the final login prompt is displayed, you should be able to log in using the username and password you previously saved. Your Raspberry Pi Zero is now ready to use. Thanks for watching.